In a short stretch of time from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, a relatively small group of people started playing around with this thing called the World Wide Web. They had the audacity to think they just might change the world. This project introduces you to the OG players from those hallowed days and lets them tell you what it was like and how you should have been there. Episode 23. Today we're talking with Richard Titus, some Razorfish royalty, another Razorfish episode. Ritesh, happy Friday.
Happy Friday. I cleaned up for you today. I actually had a shower. I put on a shirt because, you know, it's royalty. It's Titus, right?
Well, quite frankly, dressing for him, you probably should have been in a black T-shirt.
T-shirt, exactly. That's exactly what I should have been.
So anyway, how you been?
Yeah, good. Long week, usual story. I'm suffering from allergies, so I may go on mute now and again during this one because
you seem a little muffled.
Yeah, it's the coughing and sneezing is driving me mad. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Things are good.
Yeah, things are good. Things are really good. So a beautiful day here and
lovely, lovely.
So those of you watching, go to youshoulda.com if you want to see back episodes and upcoming guests and things like that. And it's awesome. You can get to podcasts and everything if you like the audio versions of these. You can leave comments here. If you leave comments, Ritesh will troll for those and pull them up on screen. So feel free to heckle Richard. He sure will. And please subscribe. Go to the YouTube channel, subscribe. We want to be influencers. We can't do it without your subscriptions. I don't know. That's what the influencers told me to say.
Exactly.
Good.
And with Richard, we might be able to get, I don't know, half a Bitcoin or a 3/4 of a Bitcoin or something. Because
we should talk crypto and NFT. Now, so. We should make some of the old websites we did into NFTs.
Exactly. There you go. And there he is.
We need some crypto advice, sir. Good to see you.
But everything that can be crypto will be crypto.
There you go. Perfect.
That's an inside Razorfish joke. If you get that one, the 20 of you who watch this later are going to all piss yourself laughing.
How are you, my friend? I haven't seen you in ages.
I'm very good. I know. I've been a bit. Well, first of all, I lived in Europe for a long time.
Yeah.
And then I met a new partner on Tinder on the way back to California, and so now we have a 3-year-old. So I decided to get back on the merry-go-round and do it again.
Love it. Well, you're looking well, and love the black T-shirt. You're completely in character. Fantastic.
Yeah. You're wearing the appropriate uniform.
Yeah.
Like I do own a lot of suits from living in the UK, but like my standard uniform is black jeans, black T-shirt, and maybe a blazer if you're paying me money.
Where in the world is Richard Titus today?
Well, so right this very moment, I'm on on Sunset Boulevard in LA at the Edition Hotel. But normally these days, I live in a place called Encinitas, 2 blocks from Moonlight Beach, which is where surfing joined California. My partner and I moved there in the beginning of quarantine because my penthouse in San Francisco is only 1,600 square feet, and we had 6 people living there. So.
Oh wow. Yeah.
That doesn't work.
Yeah, I think the people that decided for quarantine, I'm going to go somewhere nice because it really doesn't matter where I am. That was a smart call.
We initially intended it. Well, we borrowed a house from my in-laws for a few weeks because they're real estate developers. They had a house they were going to tear down, and then we were like, we had this big family meeting, and the kids didn't want to leave, and I didn't want to leave, and we were like, we're stuck in a house. Let's be near family. So our quarantine's like 40 people. Yeah, we can surf every day. There's no value. Like by the I think it was like 10 cases in this. So it's like there's no case count, right? Like this is the place to hide out, and that's what we did.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, let's dial back the time machine, Richard, and you've seen these shows. I think you said you were watching the one with Craig and Jeff, and
I watched.
All comments like they haven't changed.
40 minutes later,
these things.
By the way,
amazing.
I didn't know all that. Just so you know, I mean, I've done them for 25 years. I had no idea some of those stories.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things are you learn things that you didn't know, and then some of the things are there are things that you know that you learn. No, you didn't remember them right because you're old now, and the brain just doesn't work anymore. So give us how you discovered all this stuff and how you know, kind of whatever revelation you might have had about this internet thing, and how did it all happen for you? What were you doing, and how did you discover it and get involved?
Well, so I'm probably older on the internet than all of you, and that's because of my dad.
Now there's a challenge.
No, it's a true story. So my dad was a defense contractor, and we had an ARPANET connection with a coupler modem in our house as a kid for work.
What year was that?
1970s, like not when no one knew what it was. Like, I love computer. I viewed the computer as the best toy in the house.
Yeah.
And my father didn't have very good InfoSec practice. Like years later, he laughs. He's like, I really didn't understand how good you were. And, you know, he would write his passwords on a sticky, like, it was just terrible. Like when I think back, like, so I had full root access to this machine and
the government. That's great.
Way worse. So, you know, somewhere in my late teens, early 20s, late 10, like 9 or 10, I started downloading some cool dot matrix pictures of submarines, and some men in some cheap suits and bad shoes showed up and had a long talk with my father. And I was given my own first computer, which was not his computer.
Oh, wow.
Which was a Commodore 8. He had a Commodore 8032. He bought me a Commodore 64. So I was on the internet, telnetting, gophering, all of the things in the early days. And then I set up what we now call BBS. And I did this because I didn't have a lot of money and I wanted software. And I worked out there were people who would trade software. So I had a machine that would basically dial into this CRL, which is this internet provider, and host files. And then it was kind of like Napster, but like in the 70s.
Yeah.
And my mom found out a little. She didn't quite understand what I was doing, but she said, listen, I don't care what you do up there in your computer, but no porn. And so I named it the 818, and the Cheetah, the software you use to run your BBS, the launch screen said no porn. Yeah, welcome to the 818, no porn. Now, because I was a kid, I didn't understand the irony that all porn at that time was produced in the 818 area code, which is the Valley of California. But more importantly, if you were under 18 and lived in Southern California, you needed an account on my system because I was the only one your parents would pay for. And so people started writing me checks and mailing them, sending me cash, pennies, nickels, and envelopes to join my BBS. And eventually I had a peering relationship with something called The Well, where our machines would dial into each other and share files. And so I met all these really famous people, including the man my daughter's named after, John Perry Barlow, who used to get in endless flame wars with me on The Well, not realizing I was a 12-year-old.
Wow, that's incredible.
So like I said, I was a little earlier than all you.
Yeah.
But my primary love at that time was rock and roll, and I wanted to be a rock star. I played bass, guitar, keyboards, cello. I sang. I was really skinny, tight pants, super long hair, and I was going to be famous. Like that's all. This computer thing was like an amusing hobby, but it wasn't like going to make any money from that.
Right. And
we were dropped by our label on my 18th birthday. I got kicked out of the band the next day, and I had this moment of like enlightenment where I said, this rock and roll thing doesn't seem to pay very well. And this computer thing, people keep wanting to hire me to do stuff. Maybe I should like change strategies.
So how did you get started with all of this crazy agency stuff? Because I think I met you at Razorfish in California.
Well, you met me at Razorfish.
Working there, right? But
and
before
that, actually, Kyle, we met at Razorfish because of Felice Kincannon. So I'll back up at the origin story for the agency. Living in Southern California, there's like the three pillars of military contractors, media entertainment, and early stage startups. Oddly, then they were space or manufacturing. Now it's tech and life sciences. And I was like a guy who knew about computers, which is pretty rare. So I was always consulting and working. And when I got sober and left the music business, I went to work for a company making low budget CD-ROM video games, some of which became vaguely famous for being either too sexy or too dangerous. And I tried to get the people I worked for to start an internet division, and they just didn't know what the internet was. I mean, one of them I'll never forget pulled me aside and said, Titus, you're really smart. You should focus on making movies. That's where the real money is. Forget this internet thing.
Wow.
I'm not going to name names, but I told him the story. He just kicks himself because I would have sold him half my company for 50 grand, and he didn't, I didn't know any better. And he was like, I'm not giving Titus 50 grand. Like, what's he going to do with it? Yeah. So we made these video games, and I met this, group of designers and technologists and people, one of whom was the part-time manager of the Viper Room in LA. His name's Steven Anspaugh. And we went to his house, and he had a Spark 5 workstation on his desk. Wow. And I said, why do you have a Spark 5 on your desk? And he said, how the hell do you, looking at me, how the hell do you know what a Spark 5 is? And I was like, give me the root password and I'll show you. And so our girlfriends are sitting in the living room drinking and smoking, and we're sitting in front of his Spark nerding out. And they're like, our boyfriends are nerds. Like, what is going on over there? So Steven and I became like best friends, like right away. And eventually there was a guy named Josh Gordon who I knew, who was kind of a mediocre designer, really lovely guy, bass player for a gazillion bands. He'd been in rehab with like every rock star ever. And we were Titus and Bob Gordon. And so we formed a company called Tag and started building movie websites. We built like 2 or 3, and this is super early.
Yeah.
I had like knew a bunch of the other people building websites, and so I kind of
was like 95, 96,
95, 96.
Yeah.
The exact date's blurry because we started working with other people, and then in 96 we got a project for a company called Centropolis and a guy named Dean Devlin. He comes back in the story later. To build a website for him, and then from that website, a woman at NASA named Gay Graves, who's still there by the way, who started in the print division but was a huge movie aficionado, had seen our website and thought it was super cool and just called us up thinking we were like some big shop. It was me, Steven, Josh, and a guy named Ken Oling and a few other people. Like only Steven and I own equity. Everyone else is like a contractor or like, you know. And she's like calling my house but thinks it's an office, and she's like, hello, I'd like to set up a meeting for you guys to come up and pitch NASA. And I was like, done. So like we flew Southwest, we stayed at like a Roadhouse Inn.
That's awesome.
And we landed the NASA contract because we were low bid.
Right, because you didn't have much overhead.
Kyle, it sounds a lot like agency.com in the early days. So you were doing the same stuff.
We were doing the same things. The difference there, though, was after we did our first job from our living rooms and things like that, our first client was Time Inc. Consumer Marketing. So our first office was the Time Life building. So, they thought we were big because, we were called agency.com. Right. And then they came to our lobby and it was, the Time Life building. So
this is a little side note of the story. So I had a rent controlled apartment in Beverly Hills, in this old part of Beverly Hills that was like 20 apartments, and they all had individual addresses on a commercial street that the rest of the street is like studios. It's actually where DreamWorks is. And so if you there's no Google. So if you looked at a map, it looks like we had really posh offices in Beverly Hills. It was actually my apartment.
Oh, that's great.
The way we got an office was my then girlfriend, later wife, now ex-wife, woke up one morning at 3 a.m, walked out in her underwear, and there were 6 people coding in the living room. And she's like, look, either Tag gets an apartment or I get an apartment. I don't care which.
So now here you are, you're in swanky Beverly Hills. Everybody thinks you've got this great company. NASA's now a client. How did you end up like
it was drinking from a fire hose. Like once we got NASA, it was, like people would say, oh, we did, blah, blah, blah. And we were like, oh, we did NASA. And they were like, yeah, we use them.
Yeah. Well, that was also the thing. Like it felt like with the Fortune 500 companies, you needed 3, 2 or 3. And once you had them, you were in the club because they all talked to one another. And those early days were pretty heady days. Because
there's actually, you will remember this. We should have had Steven on as well. So Steven and I go to meet her, and Gay was really excited about the Mosaic homepage, which this guy Mark Andreessen had built, and it had this image on the cover that was Java, and it was like rollovers. And she's like, "Could you do this? But we can't use Java; it doesn't qualify under the NASA web guidelines." And so I stupidly said yes, not knowing how hard that was. And then Steven built an array, and we think it was one of, if not the first JavaScript array. And we used to see the code on other people's sites for years.
Wow.
Where they took his rollover buttons.
Yeah.
But part of why that site became so famous is people were like, how the hell did you do that? And I didn't even know how he did it. And Steven is like, I'm not, that thing's going to break every 15 minutes, but it's super cool.
Yeah, no, we were doing Perl script animations. Like there wasn't animated GIFs, and we were writing script to do animations and things like that.
Exactly, yeah.
And it blew people's minds, but it was, it was just simple stuff.
Because most of the web was a static world, and then you'd come on these sites and they were alive. And so the one other thing we did that was really interesting early is a woman named Wendy Zomner came to the office. Wendy Zomner and her partner, who was one of the founders of Cisco, had started a company called Urban Decay Cosmetics.
Yeah.
And so we built our first e-commerce site was for Urban Decay Cosmetics.
Oh, cool.
you're like, oh, why were they selling cosmetics on the internet? Well, the problem was she had all these young girls who wanted the cosmetics, but the retailers didn't believe there was demand. So all we were was like, it was the earliest direct to consumer, right?
Yeah.
Show there's demand and then get the retail channels, right?
Wow, that's amazing. And then what was the path from Tag to Razorfish?
So our problem, and I don't know, I see startups now. I'm on the board of a big accelerator called the Creative Destruction Lab, but and I see this all the time. We had the scaling problem, right? So we went from no revenue to 10 million in revenue like that, but we had no money. I literally was going to the mobile station to get groceries because that's the only credit card I had that wasn't maxed. Because in those days, you had to buy a $5,000 computer and hire someone, and you wouldn't collect your revenue for 30 to 90 days.
Yeah.
And we didn't have it. There's no venture capital in those days. I mean, I remember when we opened our bank account, our bank didn't know what we did and was very skeptical of these two rock and roll dudes coming in the office. Like they really didn't want to open that account.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so we eventually, I said, look, like we need capital, but I don't want to give up control because I know we're on a rocket ship here. So we started talking to US Web, some of the other players about doing kind of a sale where they would give us some capital, but not take over control of the office. And eventually Felice Kincannon from Omnicom, we got on the phone with her and she really liked us. And I knew someone else that worked for her at the time a little bit. And she's like, we don't have anyone in LA. You seem to be we keep talking to people and they tell us we should talk to you. So, let's do a deal. And they were going to buy us independently. Mm-hmm. And then Ren, right as we were inking the papers, so we'd signed the LOI and we were like going through all the papers, Ren was like, we're not buying any more agencies. We'll just let the agency we bought acquire agencies.
Oh, I see.
And so lots of phone calls happen. And she's like, listen, why don't you go? I'll set up meetings with all the CEOs of all of our agency groups. And if you find one you like, great. And if not, we'll have a big meeting with John and we'll see what happens. And so I met Chan and you actually in New York.
Yeah.
I met Think New Ideas. And then, so we all had this lovely series of meetings. And Jeff, I got to tell you, Jeff was like my guy. Like we were so similar.
Huh.
And everyone else I like, but I really like Jeff.
Yeah. Like if it clicks, right?
And then there was one other guy, I can't remember the company now. There was a roll-up that I really liked him, mostly because I just knew he was going to make me a lot of money. Right? And those two deals were almost the same. They were like, here's a bit of cash. It's an earn-out. You have complete control, and then you're out in 3 years, and I keep your company. Yeah. And that seemed really good to me. So my then wife, actually she was still my girlfriend, we hadn't got married yet, was Tavin, was a visual effects producer on a movie at the time called Godzilla, produced by Dean Devlin. You'll remember him.
No way, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so that we were doing, I had nothing to do with it. She was doing the premiere of Godzilla at Madison Square Garden.
Oh,
and
cool.
So I had tickets, as many as I wanted, to the hottest ticket in New York. And so I got all the agency heads, which was supposed to be you and Chan, by the way, Kyle.
You mentioned the Godzilla premiere. There's no memory of it because I didn't even know it happened.
So Chan kept those tickets. We need to have a conversation with Chan about this.
Jeff and Craig was bitter forever that I didn't invite him, and only recently learned that Jeff gave his other ticket to his assistant at the time, who is now his wife, Jill.
So two of us got screwed. So Craig
and I sat. So these guys, I'm talking to like 8 people, maybe 10 people about buying my company, and I sit them all next to each other at this giant premiere. There can be no doubt that you have all got your tickets from the same person. It was very intentional, right? And I can see you because I'm sitting literally behind Mayor Giuliani, and I can see you all. Well, I know exactly where you're sitting, right? And the next day, Dot just calls me up and he said, "How much to make those?" I'm not going to say the word. How much to make those guys go away? Slightly paraphrased. And I named what I thought was an absurd multiple on our business, and he said, "Done." Click.
Wow.
An hour later, Jason Kalkanis, who had this magazine that was sort of like the People magazine of the web business, called me up and said, "I'm confirming you're selling your company to Razorfish." I hadn't seen any papers yet. There's we had just agreed on a number. Nothing had happened, right?
He used to have a knack. Jason had this knack. I don't know where he got he had sources everywhere. It was hilarious.
I'm pretty sure Jeff told him. I'm pretty sure that was part of Jeff's closing mechanism
Yeah.
Jeff knew a shark when he saw one, and he's like, I asked Jeff later. I said, "You grossly overpaid for my company." He said, "Yeah, but the risk of having you work for one of those guys was far worse."
So we could have been colleagues, Richard. I didn't realize
Yeah.
that. Wow.
The funny thing is, I don't know if you remember. So, because I saw the video with you guys all chummy, my memory of agency.com and Razorfish was it was the Hatfields and McCoys of the web business.
Oh, it was.
There
at
has
the
been a
time,
falling
it
out.
was. Oh,
Well,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it was
Oh,
vicious.
It's funny. I mean,
yeah.
I think that, I mean, there was absolutely, like, culturally, we were completely different companies, right? It was like,
totally.
If you liked hanging out with people at agency.com, you probably wouldn't like Razorfish and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Really strong cultures. But I think there was always a mutual respect, and our paths were remarkably similar. Like, we grew to essentially the same size. We had, almost identical paths. So I think, and that was, it's also 25 years ago. So I think whatever was the sniping and I always felt like, we were better at the business stuff. You always had the sexier sites. But like, once we got into kind of the late 90s and things like that, like, I feel, like,
you notice I'm not arguing with that supposition. I totally agree.
We used to say that to clients. I remember a pitch where the client said, "We're talking to Razorfish," and it was some boring insurance company or something. We said, "Yeah, good luck with that. They'll give you some whizzy bangy site that doesn't do anything. Now, if you want to do business on the web, you should talk to us." You know.
We did the more boring stuff. Well, but so talk about, so what was it like? Now, you were LA at the time. I mean, Razorfish was deep New York. I mean, there's another sort of rivalry.
It's funny, right?
What was what was it like working then?
So Dotchus, we did our deal, and it took a little time because he was in the middle of closing 2 other transactions, and so there was a company, CHBI in London, and a company called Plastic in San Francisco. And I knew Shane because Shane and I have some San Francisco history. Jonathan Nelson from Organic used to work. Right. So Jonathan Nelson from Organic used to work for me. When I was in the music business, he was a sound engineer, and he would ride his motorcycle to my house to pick up his $200 check. Like, it was that kind of and I didn't have a super high opinion of him, but he was the first person I talked to of the Omnicom agencies because it was super easy. He's in San Francisco. Yeah. And he was not interested in having me as a partner. It was not like, it was one of those meetings where you're like, we have history and this isn't going to ever happen. Like, I really like Marita, and there was a guy that worked there I really liked, but and it wasn't that Nelson and I don't get along. We like each other, but it was just very clear that our shared past made it impossible for me to be a partner in his agency. But Shane Ginsberg used to work there, and I knew Shane from that. But I didn't know, and Shane and I had a few chats about how hard it was having an agency, and we talked about merging, but we never went anywhere because we were too busy. And so I didn't know he was talking to Jeff. And so Jeff called me up and said, "Hey, we're going to have a big party in San Francisco on a boat to celebrate your acquisition and one other in San Francisco, and there might be a third in London." And, to me, I was like, I thought I was the special one. We knew there's 2 other agencies. But I was like, "Oh, you're throwing a party. That sounds cool." And, this was like Razorfish is only, even with the combined agencies, was only a couple hundred people. It wasn't very big.
Yeah. Right.
And we had a party where most of the key staff at Razorfish went to San Francisco to this party on a boat. There's funny pictures all over the internet of it to this day. Yeah. And I met Shane, JP, everyone, all the sort of players. We all were on this boat. And by the end of the boat trip, I was like, I have gotten on a rocket ship, and this is going to be amazing. Yeah. And I always describe Razorfish as like going to business school. Like, I was very rock and roll. I'm very scrappy. I don't have a college degree. I'm like the opposite of what you'd expect a management consultant to be. But I'm very insightful about people, and I'm a good pattern matcher. And so very quickly, I started to learn that we had all these MBAs who were really, really smart, but they had no practical experience running businesses. And I'd had this very odd, diverse career, which meant I understood things about business in a way most people didn't. So I kind of fell into this interesting role of finding opportunities and developing client relationships, and then managing teams that would go in and deliver these massive engagements that TAG, if I'm honest, we could never have done a $10 million engagement. It just would never would have happened.
Yeah. Well, you had the
Cisco was the big one, right?
No, well, for LA, we had all the studios. We did Go for ABC Disney.
Right.
We had Urban Decay, American General Financial Group.
Right.
We had, at one point, there was a couple of quarters that we were the second biggest office after New York. So we grew from 30 people to 500 people in a year. Like, it was just on fire.
Insane.
Our old offices, the Binocular Building, is now Google's headquarters in LA.
Wow. Well,
Amazing.
like the business insight thing is an interesting one. I mean, that you could do pattern matching combined with the fact that you were a maker, right? You were tinkering from early on. And that was the big thing we saw, is that where the consultancies really screwed up is because they didn't do implementation, they couldn't keep up with it. So you had to be both a tinkerer and a pattern matcher. And if you could do that, if you had those two skills, then you could play this game.
Well, and I would also say that it's funny, the art of salesmanship. Like, so I'm not going to name the client, but there was a big financial services client who did a big cattle call RFP. Let's say they were in the Midwest somewhere. And it was us, IBM, one of the what were the two that had this almost the same name? Scient or Viant? I don't remember which.
Scient or Viant. Yeah, there you go.
Kind of same company, but
yeah, that's right. And well, there was Scient, Viant, IXL, and Cambridge.
Well, IXL almost that was one of the people I had at the Godzilla premiere. But anyways, I knew I knew them very, very well.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, it's this cattle call, and we all go and give our presentation and to the whole board. And I watched the presentations and listened to what everyone was talking about, and watched the people falling asleep in the audience. And I walked up, and I had asked before if there was any computer on the executive floor that had internet access. It was the assistant, the secretary at the entrance. She had internet access. So I walked up to the front and I said, "Has anyone here ever seen the internet?" No hands. And I was like, "Come on." And I got the entire executive board of this company to walk out of the board briefing room, down the hall to this poor secretary's desk, and group around her. And we booked myself a little holiday for the next weekend with my then fiance. And then we bought a book of golf and sent it to the CEO's house. And they watched in wonder, like they had never seen anything like this. And I said, "Okay, now that you've seen this, let's go do the presentation." We went back and we talked, and then now they have some context for what the hell we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
And they gave us the job at the end of the pitch in front of the other guy.
Or in front of the other companies.
I mean, first of all, letting us all see each other's pitches was catastrophically bad news for everyone, because I of course have an eidetic memory, so I remembered every single slide. I went back and it was like, "Okay, JP, here's the IBM pitch. Here's the But
no, I remember we were
understanding of the customer.
Yeah. We were exiting a pitch once, and one of the other agencies had thrown their pitch deck out. So like we looked down in the garbage and there was a pitch deck. We picked that right up. That was one of the things is you kind of knew who was going to pitch what. So you would make sure that your first 3 slides were, discrediting whatever they just pitched, and then you would say whatever your idea was.
It's so true.
That's great. What were some of the projects that you did that were like, I assume the NASA one was pretty significant.
Amazing,
like,
right? It must
holy crap! I can't believe we're doing that. What were some things you did that were game changers for you?
There was a rebrand of Disney ABC's digital presence into something called Go. It's a bit like everyone's forgotten about it now, but it was the first sort of mega portal.
Yeah,
it was the first mega portal, and that was amazing. And selling that was amazing because, like, I was college dropout. I had never expected to be in any boardroom, much less that boardroom.
Yeah. If you're creative and business, you want to be in Disney. Yeah.
There's a project we did. I don't remember the name of it. I think it was called Fuel. There was a surfing TV. It was kind of like Red from Red Bull's channel, but like years before. It was called. I can't remember the name of it, but I think it was Bolt or something. And we built a broadband video channel that didn't work because broadband didn't really work then. For surfing, surf retail. And that was like one of those, there's so many things we did at Razorfish where later you look back and you're like, yeah, we were so ahead of our time. Yeah. We should have just sat tight. I mean, like, I love telling people, so Twitter, the first time I saw Twitter, I texted a member of the executive team of Razorfish and said, "Hey, dude, some idiot just launched a soup can as a product and thinks they're going to be a billionaire." That's literally what I said. Got that one wrong. We had in our internet called Mom 3000, we had a little thing that was Twitter. It was literally everything about Twitter. You could reshare to other people, and
amazing.
Everyone used it. It was most loved feature on the internet and on the intranet. And none of us thought about productizing that. We were like, "Oh, that's just a cool thing we do." Like there was like so much playfulness in Razorfish of building cool stuff.
Yeah.
And we really didn't have the discipline of analyzing what we were doing other than innovate and move on. to go, wait, some of these things have value.
Yeah.
My friends at IDEO later would say, like, you guys should have, if you'd had a product spin out business, we could have made a fortune from that.
Yeah. No, we talked about that too, that in hindsight, there was a bunch of stuff we should have spun out. Talk to me about, you guys did a lot of work in the media space, and every time we touched the media space, it was a shit show because of the egos and just, the media world is the media world. You guys were really successful in that. Like, talk about that for me. Like, how did you guys manage that? And it's such a different thing than, a big financial services company.
Well, it's funny. We had big financial services clients who were successful. The media thing, I think, came from three things. I was, so I'd made movies. I'd been in the record business.
You'd been in the environment for so long, right?
Yeah, well, it's not just that. You have credibility, right? My wife then at the time was a pretty major figure in the visual effects. Like, she was one of the first visual effects producers in the industry. Like, people knew we were a known quantity, right? So we'd go in to pitch the executive board of Disney. And it wasn't like some rando New York firm we've never heard of. It's like, oh, that's Cynthia Merritt's son-in-law. And that's, and they would look at Jeff and Craig with his blue hair, which in a financial services meeting wasn't the greatest, but in a Hollywood meeting, they're like, right, these are smart, creative people. They have a killer, roster of gigs. And most of the work we did for media, sadly, never really got big success because it was always super avant-garde. And I used to have this thesis on sales at Razorfish, which I actually had at Schematic too. We should talk about Schematic, which is the firm I started afterwards, where I said, I want 20% of our work. And it was kind of the 80-20 rule from Google, but it was my rule was, I want 20% of our work to be mind-blowingly thought leadership. And I don't care if it's profitable. And then the 80% better be very profitable to cover that.
To cover that. Yeah.
And people, that's why designers and engineers would come work for us for half salary for what you would pay them, is because they would be like making video on the internet, or they would be doing like stuff that they couldn't do anywhere else. And frankly, no one cared about consumers then because there were no consumers on the internet. It was about doing first,
Yeah. We like ours, Urban Desires served that function for us. So we had a place to put it all. But Razorfish, that was a big part of a big part of the reputation, and deservedly so, was doing that for clients, for super sexy clients and things like that. Chan was always funny. He was like, these big boring companies, they may be boring, but they'll all pay their bills. And
well, we were the same. I mean, people don't realize that, but like Razorfish, everyone always associates Razorfish with startup culture, and I think it's because we were startup culture. Yeah. But we were Fortune 2000 clients. And like, I'd do one or two startups. Like Urban Decay was a startup, to be honest, even though it's a $1 billion company. Like, because it was not a huge success yet. And people were like, oh, it's kind of risky, And then the story I always tell is when the dot-com crash happened, and I had decided to leave by that time. Like, I knew it was time, my time was over. I wasn't unhappy. I was going to go actually work and run a mobile games company. And I had sort of told Jeff, and he was unhappy, but he was okay with it. And the dot-com crash happened. And I remember seeing a Scient pitch that someone emailed me that they had sent them. And it was basically half our bid with a thing called value pricing. I don't know if that wasn't a thing I'd ever heard of before. Yeah. It was basically like, pay us half what you're going to pay them, and then we'll square up after.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I remember those days. Yeah. People were desperate.
Like, we can't compete with that. That's right. We pay people really well, and we aren't laying anyone off during this crash. And like, this is going to kill us. And it did. They killed all of the big agencies. Got slaughtered by sort of the theme of too many players in the space charging, and then people started dropping prices. Yeah. And then a lot of big organizations started building internal teams.
Well, that's the thing. So, I mean, that's the big thing that happened is, IT guys started to figure out how to do this, and they started putting internal teams in because it was cost effective to do that sort of stuff. I remember Colgate, I think, was the first of our clients, that started to take a lot of that stuff we were doing in-house.
Train our team to do your work.
Exactly. That was amazing.
By the way, there's a funny coda to that story, which is, so I after leaving Razorfish, I waited my 9 months for my non-compete to expire. And then day and date, I bought half of a company called H Design that I renamed Schematic, which is Pritesh and I reconnected at this time because the other person that was working there was a guy named Aaron Sugarman.
Oh, that's right. I forgot he was.
Because Aaron moved to California, remember? I think that's the first time I pitched with Richard.
Yeah.
where I was losing.
We were like
my
friendly,
mind.
but we weren't friends.
Yeah.
And then
But I was,
we all
it was
pitched this
amazing.
Disney project.
It was Disney. We pitched Disney, if you remember, with Steve Walgus and Aaron and you and me. And it was because I was used to the agency.com way of pitching. I'd never worked on a Richard Titus pitch before. You know, it was like, what are we doing here?
I still wish
But it was like a mad genius at work, you know.
It was pretty funny.
That was a great pitch. We won it,
the
didn't
Schematic, I basically bought half of this guy, Dale Herrickstead, who's a very, very famous television designer company. He was the designer behind Tron and lots and lots of other things. Minority Report. He's also the worst businessman I've ever met. And if he's watching this, he will totally agree. But I love him. Like, I love him. And when we became partners, I made him share an office with me for a year because I was like, listen, you don't really know. We know each other, but not that well. I'm open book. You can learn everything. And I know I'm going to drive you crazy. But the most important thing about partners is trust. And so we shared this big office in the Hollywood Athletic Club, the billiards club. And for the first 2 weeks, he just scowled at me every day. And then, you know, because he's just like, there's a guy in his face. And then the third week, we won BMW, like the heads-up display design for the new BMW. And then he was like my bestie. Because he'd been pitching that business for a year. And he could never win it. And not only did we win it, it was profitable, which it wouldn't have been if he won it before.
Right.
But Dale was kind of a funny guy.
Schematic, right?
Yeah. So Dale had a cardboard box under his desk. And he actually had 2 cardboard boxes, and I needed a box for something. And he's like, oh, hang on. He crawled under his desk, and he dumped one of the boxes into the other box. And as I'm watching, it's full of Emmys. I don't mean like one Emmy. It's full of Emmys. He's dumping a box. And because you know Dale, you understand that totally makes sense.
Yeah, now it makes sense.
Dude, are those Emmys? Are those like your Emmys? He's like, oh yeah, I got way more. And I was like, give me that box. And I had a little case made in the lobby, and there were a lot of them. I was like, Dale. He's like, oh, it's old work. I'm embarrassed. I was like, Dale, this is insane.
Wow.
We definitely have more Emmys and awards than any other agency on this planet. Like, I'm adding award winning to our tagline.
There you go.
Exactly. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Tagline, right?
So was that a digital agency? Like what was Schematic? It was a digital agency.
And I'm not going to go through the whole long. It's sort of a sad story of how he got where he was, but essentially Dale had a broadcast design shop. So when I was at Razorfish, we bought a company called Fuel. That was a broadcast design shop because I was really, really believed in this idea of broadband television, which is now a reality, but it took way longer than I expected.
Yeah.
And so I knew all the broadcast design shops in LA because I'd met all of them when I was shopping for one. I also realized that we could use that work for lots of like identity pieces and education pieces. And it's funny, the people I know in the agency business now, they all have a little video shop. So like it was very prescient. And so Dale, when he survived the .com crash because he's just one of the most brilliant UX designers on the planet. But he was limping along, and I was sitting up in my beautiful big house that Razorfish bought me, doing nothing, basically, literally playing EverQuest. Like I was in mountain biking. And Aaron and another friend of ours, Jim, kept asking me to go meet with Dale and help him. And I was like, I gotta get paid a lot of money. And like, finally, Aaron is like, what are you doing? You have nothing to do today. He's like, you call me 6 times a day to go to lunch or coffee.
How did you know Aaron?
With Dale.
How did you know Aaron?
I knew Aaron through Andy Hobswin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because
I was quite good friends with, actually.
Yeah, Aaron went to work at New Line.
Secret agency friends.
Yeah. Aaron worked at New Line Cinema, right, for a while when he went out west. That's right. I
think he got that job separate from me, but Gordon was one of our clients at time.
Gordon Patterson. There's another name I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, I worked with Gordon and Aaron for 5 years when Gordon had Stradella Road.
Oh, so you know what's funny, Kyle? We were so close and never knew that. So Aaron went to Stradella from Schematic.
Oh, okay, got it.
So and we grew the business. It started doing television design. Then we started doing interface design, television interface design. Then we just started, we merged with a small firm called The Content Project. It was Trevor Kaufman's company. Mm-hmm. And so now we did full service. We called it interfaces between brands and clients, but it was everything, but with a heavy emphasis on TV. And we, in the TV space, we did Comcast Cablevision. Like we were the big deal in that space. I ended up joining the board of GuideWorks, which was the TV Guide, Comcast joint venture. And really, that's what I was excited about. I didn't really care about the web work. That's what Trevor loved doing, and I kind of let him do it. I was like, yeah, whatever. Make some websites. I did that already.
Was the office in Santa Monica, I think, if I
No,
remember
so
correctly?
Schematic started in Hollywood, and then when we merged into the Eric Owen Moss building in Culver City, that big spaceship thing.
Big spaceship building. That's it. I remember
when we rented
Trevor.
that office,
yeah,
we were all shitting our pants because I'd never signed a personal guarantee for a lease before, and like the four of us were on the hook, and it was scary.
Yeah,
that was a lot of money. We didn't have the money to cover it just yet, but you'd sit in the conference room with this like airliner views of the city, and Trevor is like, "We have to have it," and I was like, "I'm gonna kill you if I lose my house."
Wow. And what did you like? What did you learn from the Razorfish days or from the .com days that you carried forward, and what did you leave behind? It sounded like you didn't care so much about the digital stuff, but was there something about the way that you worked back then that you carried forward? What was the
what it was is funny is right. So digital agency business had matured. So Razorfish, I used to explain that we weren't doing marketing, we were building businesses. We were doing product development, like a digital product development.
Yeah,
that's a very common term now. Then it didn't exist. And at Schematic, we were doing that. And then when we bought Content Project, we did a bit of marketing, but it was still digital content or product development. But the thing was, is most people had a website now. So instead of, it was a remodeling business versus first time people had ever had a computer.
Yeah.
And the other thing we did a lot of is starting to hook systems together. So like one of our it's really funny at Schematic. Like again, Schematic had the 80-20 thing where the 20% of the sexy work got all the clients who frankly paid all the bills. And we did a lot of work for law firms because law firms have like, they need CRM, they need like all of these pieces to tie in. And we got really good at stitching those pieces together into a sort of consolidated solution. We did lots and lots of e-commerce and big sort of direct to consumer brand stuff. And then we did lots of media stuff that was super sparkly. We'd go on the show reel and like, if we were pitching against the players of the day, we would always win because our work was so like, who else had done a heads up display for BMW or the movie Minority Report? Like, it's kind of hard to compete with us.
Yeah. And how did that, how long did that go?
7 years. And in 6 years in, Kat and my then wife, and we had a small child now, and another one on the way. I wanted to go make movies with her and I wanted to sell the business. And I wasn't like bitter or anything. I was just done. Like I had already done this once before. And by then, I'd been doing this for, 10, 15 years of my life. And I just didn't care. And Trevor and Andrew, and Dale to a degree, but really Trevor and Andrew and Nick to some degree, really, really needed an exit. Like they'd never had a big exit. And so we had this big company partners meeting. And I said, look, guys, like I want to sell. I'll sell to you. I'll sell to someone else. I don't care. I just don't want to do this anymore. And they're like, the problem is if you leave, all the clients leave. I was like, no, I can make that not happen. And then they were like, but if we do this for 2 more years, the company will be worth, 4 times more. And I said, all right, here's the deal. I'm going to go make movies with my wife. I will show up to any meeting you want. I stay a partner. You don't have to buy me out. But I'm not coming to work every day. I'm only here to help close business and manage client relationships. And then we sell in 2 years. And if you're right, great. And if not, I get a little lever for having given up my 2 years of value of time. And they're like, done.
Wow.
And by the way, I was wrong. Trevor was right. We got a lot more money doing it his way.
Oh, that's great.
And it was also, it's when Trevor really got into his own of being able to be, the leader, the phenomenal leader that he is for the company. Because I wasn't, I cast a big shadow, and Trevor and I were always kind of like, who's in the meeting? Whose meeting is it?
I remember meeting all of them. You set it up. I was out in California.
Yeah. We were going to try to recruit you.
Yeah. And it was just the building, it was just everything. And Dale just said 3 words, I think, in the whole conversation we had. He was such a nice guy, though. Such a nice guy.
Dale is, he lives in London. I love Dale to death. Yeah. Schematic. So basically what happened is we sold it 7 years later to WPP.
Yeah.
And I was very clearly not going. And at the 11th hour, Martin Sorrell is like, who is this Richard Titus person and why have I never met him? And they were like, oh, he's not really involved. And he's like, well, all your clients think he's involved. So I was in Romania making a movie with Tavin, and I flew to London in like hiking boots and a fleece, literally from set. I didn't take a shower or anything. I like walk into like these like high street offices, everyone's wearing suits and ties, and I'm in literally like jeans, dirty hiking boots. And I sit down, and he's like, we have like a very awkward conversation. They bring in lunch, and he's like, why do you want to work for me? And I said, it's nothing to do with you. I don't even know you. I said, I'm just kind of like doing this for all my life. I don't want to do it anymore.
Right.
I'm making movies. I'm having fun. Then I thought the movie business could be very successful. It turned out to not be very successful. And he's like, all right, we're going to give you a non-compete though. And I said, yeah, whatever. So they gave me a non-compete that literally like I could work at Starbucks, but not the till, you know? But I had my friend Eric Huggers had come. He was my client at Microsoft because they were one of our big clients. We built Xbox Live. It's one of our big projects.
That's right. Yeah,
and Windows.
That's right.
Windows Media PC.
Yeah.
So Microsoft was like, they loved me. I was deep inside that company. The irony being that they had bought Razorfish by this time. So, in fact, they tried to hire me a couple times to go and be head of UX globally for Microsoft, which I turned down. But Huggers,
Eric went to BBC, right?
Well, this is the thing. So I was living in London, doing these movies, and Huggers calls me up and he says, I'm moving to London. I go, oh, great, let's have lunch. So we're going to have lunch. I'm like, what are you doing here? He goes, oh, I'm going to go work at the BBC. And I was like, oh, that's cool. He's like, what are you doing? And I said, well, today I went and got a crepe with my kids, and tomorrow I'm going to go to post-production. And he's like, why don't you come consult with me at the BBC? And I'm in the middle of selling Schematic, but I can't tell him that. And I'm like, I call my lawyer and I say, can you get them to carve out public service? Now, I haven't asked Eric. He hasn't made an offer or anything. And so in the course of a week, I get WPP to carve out that I can do anything in the public service in my non-compete. And I get Huggers to hire me as a consultant. By the way, I never saw this consulting contract. We agreed the terms and then they just hired me. Okay. And so I went to work at the BBC.
Wow.
And then from there you went to the Daily Mail guys, right? Because that's where we reconnected again.
Right. So BBC was amazing. Within 2 years we transformed.
You did some crazy, amazing stuff at the BBC.
What the most fun I've ever had.
What was your role?
So my title was controller of future media, which has got to be the best title ever.
That's pretty solid.
I seriously still want that title. I'd like to put that back in my bio.
Yeah. Very British titles. Very British.
Well, and controller is because it's a crown asset. So controller means you have budget, right? And there aren't very many controllers with a fixed number, and you have money, and you can actually sign checks, and and so Huggers was group controller of future media and technology. So that meant he did everything from make sure the printers ran and the sticks on the hill broadcast television to all of the things in sort of my purvey. And my first day, he was on his way to holiday in Sicily, and he said, okay, there's the website's a piece of shit. Could you redesign it? There's this branding thing that we don't have any part of. Could you go weasel your way into that? And there's these guys on the 4th floor doing something called IMP. It's a video thing. You might think it's cool. It's using Windows Media. Why don't you take a look at that? And so, and I'll see you in 6 weeks. And so he went on holiday. And he came back, and by Christmas, we relaunched the homepage of the BBC with a customized, personalized homepage.
Personalization engine, I remember that
which blew the minds of most people in the world. We launched iPlayer on Christmas Day, and IMP was a Windows Media catch-up TV service that didn't really work. And in 90 days, a guy named Anthony Rose that we hired, and I took that and made the world's first catch-up service before Hulu, before anything. This was the very, very first. And then just for fun, we launched a mobile browsing service, which at that time was the first non-WAP browsing service for a mobile phone ever in the world. It was initially news and sports. And no one talks about that, but that was frankly the most important of those things, because the first two things everyone could conceive of, but the last one, no one had conceived that a mobile phone was going to be a mobile computing device like that.
What were the phones? iPhone wasn't out yet, right?
Nokia had a little browser in it. And BlackBerry. So it was RIM.
Blackberries?
Yep.
And there were two. It was like a device ID thing, and then it'd go either Nokia or BlackBerry. And cool. Because of that, we got into the first iPhone pre-release. And then BBC and Apple had a war to end all wars about the dev contract, and we didn't actually get to launch with iPhone. Everything was built. It was in my, sitting in a little well-done building, but couldn't launch.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That was amazing work. I remember you sent me a link. You said, "Hey, can you test this thing out?" It was the browser, the new website. I was like, "Holy smokes, this is amazing!"
I love Matthew Postgate, who worked for me on mobile. Huggers introduced him to me. So I became the person that you would give bright young things who you didn't want corrupted by the BBC sort of treachery.
Yeah.
And so Huggers and I were quite close. So he calls me up and he says, there's a young guy named Matthew. He reports to me, but he's too junior. He's doing this mobile thing. I want you to manage him, but be nice. I was like, okay. So I said to Matthew, and I thought the mobile launch was cool because I wanted all the press. And then I didn't give a shit about this. I was like, no one's going to use this thing. So I was like, listen, Matthew, you have the perfect job. You do your mobile thing. I want to see you once every 2 weeks for a report. Don't bother me. Don't ask for extra money. Don't like you can do this for 2 years. I will never fire you as long as you just do your job and show me numbers that trend somewhere vaguely upward. And every month he's bringing me these reports that are showing me growth like this. Like 400% growth, 800% growth. And I was like, this can't be right. And so in my style, I finally was like, I think he's full of shit. So I like went down to like Red Bee and Siemens and had this big meeting without Matthew. And they're like, actually, we think we've been counting the numbers wrong. I said, see? And they said, yeah, they're actually twice as big.
Wow.
I went,
whoa.
So at that point, I'm like, can you get Matthew down here?
Yeah.
Wow.
I need to speak
and
to
I
this
said,
kid.
how much money do you need? Because right now, cost per user, you are the most valuable service at the BBC in my digital portfolio. And I want to, what else can we do? And he's like, are you serious? And I was like, the sky's the limit. Like, tell me, this is amazing. And that's how, and Matthew now, by the way, is the CTO of the BBC.
Oh, amazing. Wow. Good for him.
Yeah, he's
Good
just amazing. I love him. He's like one of the best executives ever. Yeah. So brilliant.
What a career. And so what are you up to these days? What
are you doing now? Yeah. I mean, you went from the BBC to the Daily Mail, right? And then you
went
left
to the Daily Mail.
Back, right?
I was chief exec of something called AND, which is the digital holding group for all the digital assets. Everyone always talks about the Mail as if I was responsible for that. I had very little to do with it. It didn't work for me, but most of my work was on classifieds, which is where all the cash was. We did, when I joined, it was 80 million pounds. When I left, it was 140. And the 80 to 90% of that was classifieds in the UK and Eastern Europe, Latin America.
Yeah, exactly.
My biggest problem is I couldn't buy them fast enough, and Tiger and Naspers would outbid me most of the time because I had to go talk to a board, which had to call a meeting, and Naspers would just be like, "Oh, $4 million? Yeah, let me just try. How about I put a little extra for you?"
Wow, amazing.
So I left the Daily. When I got divorced, my ex moved to San Francisco to be with her lover. And so I was commuting London, New York, San Francisco for a while. And eventually it just wasn't working. Like, it's like being in London and having your kids in San Francisco is just too hard. So I left the Mail. I didn't really love it there, but it was fine. Moved to San Francisco and then did a startup. I was really convinced that like this gig economy needed a platform for scheduling payments and marketing. And I was totally right.
Yeah.
Like there are $3 billion businesses in this space now. We weren't one of them.
You're probably about 2 years ahead of your time. That was the problem.
And we were also built on something called Parse, which Facebook acquired for $70 million and then shut down. So that was and I had just, I was in the middle of pushing my, the CTO out. So I could raise money with no platform or no CTO, but not both.
Yeah.
Right.
Like every VC I know is like, I love you. No way.
So what are you doing? What are you doing now?
So we sold the company, and then I joined Samsung Electronics for a couple of years and ran UX and product experience there. So basically the same thing as previous. And then when I left Samsung, I was really curious about three things. I wanted to learn about artificial intelligence, I wanted to learn about AR, VR, and I wanted to learn about blockchain. And so for AR, VR, I joined the board of a company called Exit Reality. It's until COVID, it was one of the biggest LBE VR firms in the world. I think it's dead now. I had to step down. For blockchain, blockchain is a virus, by the way, that consumes all available resources. So I started a blockchain firm and was very successful called ARC. And then I joined as a mentor and accelerator in Canada called the Creative Destruction Lab. I'm now a fellow there and deeply involved in the organization. At that time, it was an AI, artificial intelligence focused accelerator at the University of Toronto. It's over the last 5 years, we've created $8 billion of asset value, 600 companies, more than 10 sites, and all the sites are partnered with big top tier universities. So Oxford, HSA, Georgia Tech, University of Washington. And it's, research engineers and B school students who come together to form businesses or businesses apply, and there's an objective-based system. The professor is an amazing guy, Jay Agarwal. It's just amazing. We were involved in helping get rapid COVID testing deployed. It's like one of the most exciting things I ever did by accident. And so now today, I'm very involved in that. It's about 20% of my time. I'm on a couple of boards, and I'm actually like in this transition period where, thanks to COVID, I make a lot of my money from speaking fees, and I make a bunch of my money from going into places and making meetings, and none of that happened for a year. So I was forced to sort of take a little vacation, which was kind of nice, actually.
That's kind of cool.
So my surfing is much better.
Yeah, I gotta say you are looking a lot rested than I've seen you for a long time. Whenever we used to have tea,
sunburn.
Yeah, yeah. I have to, AI Canada. They did an amazing job between Toronto and Montreal of making Canada the center for AI. It is amazing. I used to go up there once a month. I do a thing similarly with McMaster University where I talk about health and digital health, and I do a class every year for the MBA class. So it was fascinating as I started traveling there in the last 2 years. 2 years before COVID, how they were amassing these assets in Canada to really create 2 AI centers of excellence in Toronto and Montreal. It's mind-blowing.
Well, and it's funny, the first session I went to, there was like 60 people in the room, including Wim Turnstow-Padot, who invented Alexa, Arnie Pell, who's the guy who brought me from Microsoft, the woman who runs Neuralink now for Elon. I mean, like, I was definitely the dumbest person in the room, but I knew a lot about taking companies to market, and none of these people have ever done that, right?
Right.
I was like this useless but important person you need on the team, with all these like smart research scientists. The thing about CDL, Creative Destruction Lab, is it started in a very small, tight focus. Now we're blockchain, quantum computing, life sciences. Actually, we have a stream this year called Risk, about risk management and software. I helped start the blockchain stream, and I'm on the board of DM, which is the Facebook cryptocurrency. So it's been like, this year there'll be 600 or 700 companies that come through the system. 200 or 300 will graduate, and I love it. And it's funny. I love the work. I love the impact I have on young entrepreneurs, particularly female and minorities. And it's like, it doesn't really pay me anything, but it's like my favorite part of the week.
Yeah.
So, I have to say, listening for the last hour, and Carl, this goes for you too, and when I speak to you all the time, it's that curiosity, wonder, thinking of a new thing. That's the culture that started in 1994, and it's in your DNA. You guys are always traveling and always looking for that, how am I going to change the world kind of thing, right? Do you think you brought that through all the way along? I think it's
Kyle,
right?
What do you think? It's like I'm addicted to that drug. That's the one I'm still.
I mean, for me, like it totally makes sense to me. Like, your favorite thing isn't the thing that is necessarily the business thing, yet it's generating all of this business.
That's right.
I'm a similar sort of thing. Like, if I'm not connected to if I'm not problem solving constantly, it's like I feel like, well, I'm done here. And in fact, I left agency when it was like, oh, we don't need innovation anymore. We're just making websites now. I
remember that when you said, I'm done.
I was like, because what I knew was I could wait it out for 3 years, but I'm like, that's 3 years where I will not survive it. Because it's like,
you know what's funny, Kyle? Ritesh told me that you and I would like each other, and because we didn't really know each other very well. And he's totally right. You are the me of agency, right? Razorfish, those guys were all sharks. They all wanted money. They're all driving their Maseratis. And I was like, I could care less about money. I want to make cool stuff.
There you go.
And the money will show up.
You two would like each other.
Yeah. Let's connect after this, because I'd love to continue the conversation.
Richard, it's so great to see you. So great.
By the way, the answer to your question is, I've spent the last 9 months deciding what to do next. And I'm looking at some of your operating roles, but the thing I'm really drawn to is to move into venture capital. And I toyed with the idea of doing it myself as a typical entrepreneur, and I think I'm going to try something different than what I've done before, because I'm going to find a firm or a fund to join with people who already know how to do the thing I want to do, rather than like setting up a shingle and figuring out. I don't know. It might not work, but it seems like an interesting approach that everyone else has tried their whole life and I've never done.
Well, and also, like, you said, with the group in Canada, you're kind of the missing ingredient of experience. I feel like you could be special sauce in one of those funds.
Absolutely. And I'm going to introduce you to Richard. I'll introduce you to Cheryl Chang at V Ventures in San Fran. You two should chat. She's great.
Cool. Awesome.
All right, guys.
So good, you guys. So good.
I
have 2 candidates. Can I propose people for this?
Yeah,
please,
sure.
Please.
Yeah.
One is my old partner, Steven from Razorfish.
Okay.
You should for sure have and do. And the other one is, hang on 1 second. I have to think about
We've got to
this.
get Aaron.
And Aaron, that's actually who it was.
We've got to get Aaron.
Yeah, we got to get Aaron.
Yeah.
All right, good.
All right, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Talk
Thank
soon,
you.
Richard.
Thank you. Enjoy your dinner this evening.
See ya.
Cheers, everybody.